What's up YouTube, this is Tubedigga. This video is an overview of the legendary Roland MC909 Groovebox from 2003. Before I get into this video, I just want to thank all my current subscribers, anyone that's liked and shared my videos, anyone that follows and supports me on social media, all of my current patrons on Patreon. If you'd like private lessons with myself, please contact me at tubedigga@gmail.com for more information. I've also got my MPC Masterclass, so if you're interested in that, please head over to courses.tubedigga.com or tubedigga.com/MPC Masterclass. And if you'd like 20% off of the premium or standard version of those courses, please enter the following discount code. It's MPC Masterclass 20, that's all capitals, and you can enter that coupon code upon checkout. Just so you're aware, those courses are extremely good value because you don't just get what's there currently, you get anything that I add to it in the future. And I can't guarantee when I will add to it and how much I will add to it, but if you've got a particular video request or there's something missing, you're always welcome to contact me at my email address, which is tubedigga@gmail.com. So it's not something that you're just going to be left with like a lot of these courses where there's no ongoing support. So that's courses.tubedigga.com or www.tubedigga.com/MPC Masterclass. I've wanted this machine for over 12 years probably now, and finally towards the end of February 2022 I managed to obtain one for myself, and here she is. As you can see, she's absolutely massive, but she's absolutely beautiful. Now, some people consider the MC505 to be the best one, so there is some kind of dispute between users like there is between MPC users as to which MPC is the best. I don't really care. In my opinion, this one is absolutely fantastic, and in this video I'm going to show you how it works and all the things that it does. Now, this machine has single-handedly been responsible for doubling my followers on Instagram in the past few weeks since owning it. I started uploading videos of me using this. I've now got over 7,000 followers on Instagram, which is absolutely unbelievable. So thank you very much for everyone that's followed me on Instagram. If you're watching this video, I really appreciate the support and the interest that you guys have got for this machine. And it seems to be the case that people are really passionate about this machine and they really like seeing it put to action in 2022. So I'm going to get straight into this and talk about all the top panel controls. Now, even though I wanted this machine for 12 years, I did look at a lot of videos just to double check that it's something that I really did want to use and keep. And I took an educated kind of risk really, based on the fact that a lot of the videos that I saw didn't really do it justice. It certainly does a lot more than I thought it did, and all the videos that I watched certainly didn't show me the things that I wanted to do with this machine. And it was only down to my own kind of artistic endeavours and passion for actually getting involved in machines like this to discover what it did, and also reading the manual. So a lot of people band about this expression, read the manual. It's true, you should read the manual because I've used it as it should be used. It's a reference manual. You don't have to sit there and read it like a novel. But as you can see, I've got the original manual here, and you know, it is literally jam-packed full of information. Why would you not want this in your hand to get to know a device like this? It's so useful. So let me tell you about all these different controls which will explain to you what this machine is capable of. So at the top here, we've got these D-beam controllers. If you're not familiar with D-beams, they basically interpret light signals to control various parameters. So if we put our hand over them, we can change the filter cutoff or the pitch of a sound or the volume, things like that. So these buttons here, beam 1 on and beam 2 on, switch our D-beams on and off. Pretty self-explanatory. This is the D-beam light sensor itself for D-beam 1 and D-beam 2. Over here is where we assign the different things that we can control with our D-beams. So the different things that we can control with our D-beams are solo synth. So this is basically like a monophonic theremin kind of thing, which we can control the pitch of by moving our hand over the D-beams. We've got cutoff and resonance. So this is to control our filter. We've got turntable emulation. So we can slow down a sample, for example. And assignable is something that we have to go into the system settings and assign a particular parameter that we want to control with the D-beams. So that's the twin D-beams. Underneath that over here on the top left, we've got our main output. We've got our input for sampling. Next to that, we've got a pitch envelope. This is a simple attack and decay envelope. And we've got the overall depth, so we can go positive and negative. This knob here controls the fine and coarse tuning. So we've got a button here to switch between fine and coarse, and the knob will control the actual pitch of a particular sound. Underneath that, we've got our filter section. So we've got cutoff, resonance. Underneath that, we can choose between different filter types. So let me just switch to a track where we've got a filter assigned there, and we can select low pass, band pass, high pass, PKG, low pass 2 and low pass 3. Next to that, we've got our filter envelope. So this is an ADSR envelope. We've got the depth, so we can go positive and negative, and then we've got our ADSR to shape the sound. Underneath that, we've got our LFO1 controls. The MC909 has 2 LFOs, but we've just got one top panel control for it. To program LFO2 and assign what parameter it controls, we have to go into the patch and edit it from there. So these waveforms are morphable. Again, we can switch that on and off in the system settings. So with it set to on, it will morph between these different shapes. If we switch it off, it will just jump between them. The button underneath this knob selects whether we're controlling the depth or the rate of the LFO. Next to that, we've got our amplitude envelope. So we've got our overall level for a particular patch, and then we've got our ADSR to shape the actual volume of our sound. Underneath that, we've got matrix control, random modify, and unison. Matrix control, again, is an assignable parameter. So we can assign something for just this knob to control for live performance. And this can be recorded in real time, like automation can be on an MPC, for example. Next to that, we've got random modify. So this just randomizes a sound. I don't really use it too much, but you can just throw in a bit of weird randomness on a synthesizer patch, for example, whilst you're playing back your pattern. Next to that, we've got unison. If you don't know what unison is, it basically doubles up and thickens the sound of a particular patch, like a synthesizer, for example, and we can control the amount of depth of that, and it slightly detunes it and gives us those kind of thick kind of synth sounds. Next to that, we've got portamento, so we can do pitch glides. And next to that, we've got solo. This basically switches your sound between polyphonic and monophonic. You'll notice that if we choose unison, solo becomes activated because we only can have a monophonic sound when it's in unison mode. Underneath that, we've got our tone switches. So if you're an MPC user, you'll know that each pad in an MPC has 4 different layers, and that's basically what this is. So we can select up to 4 different layers for a particular patch, and we can choose which one we want to edit, or we can edit them all together, or just some of them, just by pressing them all at the same time. And we can switch them on and off with our tone switches there. Underneath that, we've got our mastering section. So this is like a multi-band compressor. So we can compress different frequency bands. We've got high, mid and low, and we've got our attack and release controls. Let's just press mastering here, which you can choose with your function 5 key or F5 key. And you can see when I modify that, it's controlling the low at the moment. If we go to high, it's controlling the attack and release for the compressor for the high band. And we would use our cursor keys here to adjust these other parameters. So this is something, again, that I don't use a lot, but once you've got all your patterns or your song sounding as you want it, you would switch that on. But when I'm actually programming, I switch this off. Underneath that, we've got some really interesting options here. So we've got pattern call, RPS, we've got an arpeggiator, and we've got chord memory. So what pattern call does is enables you to select a pattern via the 16 pads here. So let's say we had a load of patterns in our pattern list, like I've got here. We can assign any one of these patterns to be recalled by any one of these pads. And we've got multiple sets of those. So we're not just limited to the 16 pads. We've got different setups that we can have for our pattern call. So this is really handy. Let's just press list, and you can see that it brings up a list of all the patterns. So let's say we had pattern 15. We could assign that to pad 1. And we could recall pattern 22 from pad 2. So it just saves you scrolling or navigating to a particular pattern either via the list or via your main data wheel here. You could just press pattern call, choose one of your patterns and recall it via the pads. You can also see that if we press and hold pattern call, we can press F6, and this will show us all the different patterns that we've got assigned to the different pads. And you can see we've got different pattern sets. So we get 50 different pattern sets. So it's really, really powerful. You'll never be stuck for setting up all your different patterns for these different pads.
Everywhere, 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 everywhere.
Next to pattern call, we've got RPS. This is one of the best features, in my opinion, of the MC909. It's absolutely superb. If we press RPS, now the pads can play back a particular rhythm or melody from any pattern over any other pattern. So as you can see, I've got a number of breakbeats programmed on several of these pads. So this essentially would enable me to do a live set and introduce a breakbeat from a pattern that's going to come after the current pattern and lead into it. So it's almost like you can do live DJ mixing just by triggering one of these rhythms or melodies that come from a different pattern as you're leading up to it. That's how I would use it. So it's really, really excellent, and it's fully in sync, and you can actually set it to trigger at different quantization values. Again, like pattern call, if we press and hold RPS, we can press F6. And as you can see, we've got all these different settings to set up RPS to exactly how we want it to be. It's really great. We've also got a mixer for it. So the different breakbeats that I just played back to you, let's say some of the volumes were a little bit off from where I've programmed them in one pattern to another, we can actually mix them here from this mixer. So it's a really, really excellent facility having this RPS in the 909. Next to that, we've got our arpeggiator. This is a fully fledged arpeggiator. It's not just some basic arpeggiator. If we engage it, again, we can press and hold it and go into the ARP setting by pressing F6. And you can see we've got our different time divisions, we've got different patterns or motifs as they call them, we've got the duration, we've got the octave range, and we've got remote keyboards, which just enables us to play back the arpeggiator via an external MIDI keyboard. We can edit the arpeggiator, so we can create our own arpeggios. So it's a fully fledged arpeggiator and not some basic function with this machine. Next to that, we've got chord memory. You can see that we can use the arpeggio alongside the chord memory. Chord memory obviously allows us to play back a chord via one pad. If we press and hold chord memory, we can choose our chord settings via F6. And we can edit the chords, and it shows you exactly what notes are in a particular chord. We can delete the notes, add notes. It's a really, really excellent feature like all these others. So this section here is very interesting and very usable. Underneath that, we've got a V-Link button. This enables us to link the MC909 to one of the Roland or Edirol video performance devices. I'm not too sure exactly which ones would be compatible with this. It does list a particular one in the manual, but this enables us to do live video performances in sync with the 909. Next to that, we've got octave plus and minus. So with a track that's got a synthesizer on it or a piano sound, for example, we can just go up and down the octaves. So we're not just limited to the 16 pads. This is a feature that I really, really keep banging on about, which I want to see in MPC. And all the Roland SP samplers have this pad hold. So if you've got a looping sample, you can just engage hold, press the pad, and it will loop that sample indefinitely, or a synthesizer sound, which is really handy for things like live soundscape or drone performances. Or if you just want to trigger some samples and not use the sequencer. Let's now move across to the middle section. As you can see, we've got our nice big display here. We can control the contrast with this knob up here. At the bottom of the screen, we've got different options depending what mode you're in. So it's quite funny because I keep touching this screen expecting it to do something, but it doesn't because I'm so used to using the Akai Force and the MPC. But this is not a touch screen, obviously, from 2003. So we have to press the F keys here. So if we press F1, you can see that will bring up our pattern list. So this is a good way to just see an overview of all the patterns that you've got in your memory. So we can choose a preset pattern, a user pattern, or a pattern that we've stored on our smart media card. And we can just choose select pattern from there, or we could just press enter, and that will select this particular pattern. Next to that, we've got edit. So this is in pattern mode again. So if we press F2, we can edit our pattern. There's tons of more options here. So you can copy a particular bar. So we can copy from bar 1 to bar 4, which is everything. So you press that. I'm not going to go too into this because it's not a fully fledged tutorial on this. If you do want private tuition on this, obviously contact me at tubedigga@gmail.com. I've got myself up to a standard now where I can teach people how to use this machine to a high level. So we can copy events, we can erase events, we can delete events. So the difference between erase and delete is like deleting bars. Erase enables you to erase particular events rather than whole measures, if that makes sense. We can insert measures and we can transpose. So let's just exit out of there. Then we've got mixer. So that just shows us an overview of our mixer. We've got our 8 faders here. This is enabling me to control the volume of tracks 1 to 8 or parts 1 to 8 as they refer to it in the 909. You can see down here we've got part assign. So if we press that, that will go red. Now these faders are modifying parts or tracks 9 to 16. Pretty self-explanatory. If we use our cursor, we can go up and edit the panning and the reverb amount and the different key, which is the pitch of a different patch. And this is really interesting. So let's say we had a breakbeat programmed and it was a sample that we chopped up into really small sections. That is a way that we can actually modify the pitch without upsetting the timings because everything is chopped into individual hits. You can have one pattern with this particular pitch setting. So let's say +3. We would press right, store the pattern, go to another pattern, or actually copy or write this pattern to another pattern, and we can have a completely different setup for all of these parameters. So we can have a different pitch for a different patch or voice. We can have different pan settings, and all of this is storable per pattern. So it's really flexible from that point of view. So we can choose panning, and it will just jump to panning, key shift, reverb level, or you can use, as said, the cursor keys. And we can press close. So that's mixer. We've got effects. The effects routing and setup is per pattern. So you aren't stuck to a particular effects setup across the board. These are all independent for each and every pattern. And we just set up the different routings for that. Again, I'm not going to go into all the different parameters here, but we can edit our main compressor. We've got 2 MFX. So in MFX1, we've got up to 38 effects. MFX2, we've got 47 different effects. We've got a reverb, which is an overall reverb. We can choose different types of reverbs or switch it off. And again, we can just close that. We've got our mastering, which I showed you earlier. And we've got our BPM here, which we can set for our pattern. Let's just close that. Over here, we've got a shift button. So in some modes, this doesn't do anything, but as you can see in this main mode, it does. So if we press and hold shift, we can go to our ARP, chord memory, pattern call, RPS, system, and utility. It just saves you maybe pressing your menu button and going to system there. It's a shortcut, so we could just press that, press system, and that'll go straight to your system settings. Down here, we've got our mute button. So if we press mute, this is where we can mute and unmute parts. You can see now these LEDs are flashing, and that's telling us that all of these parts are currently muted. You can't mute parts that don't have any sounds programmed into a particular pattern. So this is quite good because it shows you what parts are being used for a particular pattern. So I'm only using 4 out of a possible 16. If we don't want to press F3, we can just press mixer assign, and that will take us to our mixer. Let's go over towards the top right now. So we've got our LCD contrast, which I showed you. We've got our main menu button, which takes us to our system settings. So we've got system, utility, our MIDI, file utility, USB. So we can connect the 909 to a computer and transfer files back and forth. And we've got undo and redo. Bit of a strange place to put that. That should be a top panel button, obviously, which would be really handy. So let's just press enter. That will just undo the last operation. Over here, we've got our sampling section. So if we press sampling, resampling, again, we've got different options at the bottom of the screen now. So let's press sampling. And this is where we get our incoming sample coming into the machine. We can choose what input. Mine's currently set to line in 1. We can choose digital if we've got an optical connection there. We've got a digital coax connection as well. We can choose microphone, which obviously gives us a different kind of signal if we've got a microphone connected, or we can choose line in stereo here. And then you do have to go down every single time you enter sampling mode. You have to choose whether it's a stereo or mono. It will always default to stereo. So if you want to take up half of the RAM memory and you don't need a stereo sample, always remember before you start sampling to switch that to mono. We've got pre-sample time and we've got a stop trigger. So it will stop based on a beat or time. So we can choose an amount of time to sample. I just have mine set to manual. We've got an auto trigger level. So if we choose this option here, auto trigger, as soon as this receives a certain signal, it will activate the recording, and you can set the actual trigger level there with this parameter. Let's just exit out of that. Another great feature is resampling. So we can just resample the internal audio. So if we've got a nice pattern and we want to turn that into a piece of audio that we want to chop up and further remix, the 909 is completely capable of doing that. We've also got auto divide, which is similar to on the MPC, where you can do real-time chopping of the sample as it comes into the machine. So let's say we've sampled something or we've imported a sample and we want to edit it. We just press edit in the sampling section, and there you can see we've got a nice big display of our waveform. This is really, really great for a machine that's pretty much nearly 20 years old now. So we can zoom with our cursor button. So if I press the right one, you can see we can get right in there and zoom in on our waveform. We can go up and down to choose whether we're editing the start point, loop point or end points. And we can press the left arrow button to zoom back out. If we press and hold shift, we can actually get a vertical zoom. And that will make the waveform really thick or really thin. If we press and hold shift, you can see we've got different functions here, which are also up here. So we've got chop, emphasis, combine, time stretch, normalize. But if we press and hold shift, we've got all those down on the bottom of the screen as well. So chopping is really simple in the 909. So let's just go to chop by pressing and holding shift and press F1. So we can't edit this. Let's just go to the sample list. And that's because it's a preset. It won't allow you to edit the preset samples. You also can't delete them, which is unfortunate. But there you go. Let's go to user and let's choose this sample. Okay, so let's press select. And if we press chop up here or press and hold shift and press chop, we can now chop this sample. So we can press auto chop. And we've got different types. We can chop it at different levels. This is like threshold or beats, or we can divide it into an exact amount of portions. So let's just choose that. 16, let's press auto chop. And that split up this sample across our pad. We can zoom in and you can see it says current address. But if we go down to 0.1, that is where we can actually change it. And it will stop at where the start of the next chop is. So we can edit the different start and end points of these chops, and it's fully editable, and then we can just press execute and that will chop this into a patch, and we can store that patch either in the user memory or our smart media card. I'm not going to go into every single option that we've got here, but just to show you that it's a fully fledged sampler that you can do chopping and editing. Unfortunately, the only thing it doesn't have is fade in and fade out. You can see we've got mix in here. So if we press mix in, this will allow us to mix in external audio, whether we're sampling it or not. Underneath that, we've got our effects knobs here. So we can choose the type of effects. So we can choose knob assign, and we can assign what parameters are affected by these knobs for a particular effect. And we can switch off the main compressor, MFX1, MFX2, and reverb. So that's just your main effects control section there. Here's your write button. So whether you're in song, pattern, or sample patch mode, we can write those to either the card or the user memory, which is the internal memory of the 909. Underneath that, obviously, we've got our main data wheel. We've got our cursor keys, which I've showed you throughout this video. We've got our decrement and increment buttons, so we can just go up and down the patterns by pressing those, or we could just use the data wheel. So it's just another way of navigating around the system. We can exit out of particular screen, so let's go to effects. If we press exit, that will always take us back to this main page here. And we've got our enter button to execute certain functions in particular modes. Here's our sequence of transport controls. We've got top, which just takes us back to the start of the pattern. We can go forward, so you can see that's jumping through the progress bar there. And then we can just press play and it will play from that position, much like the MPCs can do. We've got our record. So if we press record, we can choose real-time recording, TR style recording. This is something that I use a lot in this. Step recording's similar, but I don't really use it. It's a little bit more fiddly. We're nearly done. Let's talk about the smart media card. Now, the one that I've got here, this is actually an XD card adapter. So I'm going to just pull that out now and show you what that is. I believe you can still get these probably on places like eBay, maybe Amazon, but they're going to be pretty hard to find. This is an old type of media that was used for cameras, I believe, back in the day. So this is an XD card. It's not an SD card. I don't know if you can see that. But this is an XD card. This is 256 megabytes. So this machine's RAM has been expanded to around 200, I think it's got about 270 megabytes because it's got the default RAM, which I think is 16 megabytes internal memory, and it's got additional RAM, which brings it up to about 270. Now, this allows me to store as much of that RAM onto this card. I don't necessarily need that because I do have other cards. Let me just get one. So I've got these other 128 megabyte cards here, which in my opinion is more than enough. If you're kind of economical with your samples and you can think ahead and you're not being greedy with the amount of sampling you want to do, you know, you can work with 128 meg easily. You can work with 64 megabytes easily, but it depends what you want to do, obviously. But yeah, this XD card just goes in here, and then you've got this adapter, which is just the same as an actual smart media card, and it just converts the data. So you always insert it with the bronze or gold plates facing up towards the machine like that, and that goes in there. But that's what that does. That's the smart media storage for your samples. You can store patterns, you can store your patches. If you've either used up the memory or you just don't want to trust the memory and you want a backup of it, or for whatever reason, you can store it all on your smart media. Under here, we've got this turntable emulation. So you can assign this nice big fader here to control the pitch of a particular voice or patch, or the filter. I think you can assign to it. You can assign different things to it. If we go into menu, system, panel control, and then this one here, TTE tap DB. So this is turntable emulation. So you can change the slider type from modulation, pitch bend, TTE. Now I think there's somewhere where you can change what that modulation is, and you can set up how this actually responds, you know, the amount of sensitivity or the range, etc, etc. Let's just exit out of there. If you're wondering how I got this on there, let's go back into system. This is my logo for my jungle and drum and bass pseudonym, which is Type. This is a bitmap. So you just create a bitmap in Photoshop, and it has to be a particular dimension. I think it's quite small, something like 320 by 140 or something like that. You just store that on your smart media card, and then you can import that as a bitmap. So let's go to panel control, background, and then you can choose different background pictures, and you can actually sort of zoom around to take a look at that with your cursor keys. You can choose import BMP. So let's just press import. We go to card, and then we go down to TMP. You have to put it in this TMP or temporary folder. And there you can see that I've got TD, TD2, so I can choose import. And now I've got a Tubedigga bitmap. So it's quite nice that you can have your own actual bitmap or logo or graphics in the background there. So let's just press cancel. That's your turntable emulation. That's where I kind of went off track a little bit. You can choose to use this to control your pitch, your overall BPM. I don't really like this. I like to set up my BPM, switch these off and just leave it. And it will just default to the actual pattern BPM, which is 170 in my case. And then last of all, you just got a tap tempo button. So if you want to tap along to a particular beat and have your pattern play at that particular tempo, that's what that does. Simple. These breakbeats that you're going to hear now are actually 8-bit samples, and I've used this filter, the PKG filter, on those samples, and it really brings back all the nice high frequencies and harmonics, and actually almost somewhat restores the samples. So I'm working with very, very small data. So let's just go into sample edit, and if we go to sample list and card, you can see that all my samples are really small, like these funky drummer samples and Amen, all my Amen chops that I've got here. That's 9 kilobytes for that Amen snare. And the quality isn't that bad at all. And then when you add the effects and the filters, it just basically just sounds as good as a 16-bit sample, but with that extra grit. So just as a tip, if you want to cut down on your memory, you can make your samples 8-bit mono and also pitch them up, not really high, but even, you know, something like an octave higher, and then you need to bring them back down once they're in the machine, and they'll take up a lot less data on your smart media card or in the user memory of your 909. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. Please like, share and subscribe. Please follow me on Instagram if you wish. If you'd like private lessons with myself over Skype or Zoom, please contact me at tubedigga@gmail.com for more details. If you're interested in my MPC Masterclass, please head over to courses.tubedigga.com. If you'd like a 20% discount off of the premium or standard version of those courses, please enter the following code upon checkout. It's MPC Masterclass 20, and that's all capitals. And I shall see you on the next one. Thanks for watching. This is Tubedigga, and I'm out.